Thank you, Vidya. And thank you to all of you. We appreciate you being here to learn more about Pay As You Throw. My name is Heather Allen. I'm the Community Programs Director here at High Country Conservation Center, or HC3, you may hear us call ourselves. This evening's forum is hosted by HC3 in partnership with Summit County Government. For those of you who haven't heard of HC3, we are a local nonprofit with the mission to promote practical solutions for waste reduction and resource conservation in Summit County. We partner closely with the Summit County government and the town governments to educate our community on impactful but practical climate action in service to the sustainability of this beautiful place we call home. Tonight, you will hear from HE3's Executive Director, Jen Schenk, as she presents information about the Pay As You Throw program and what that means to you and others in Summit County. Before I pass it over to Jen, I want to shout out some folks behind the scenes. My colleagues Christy Turner and Madeline Green are supporting production and tech. We couldn't do this without them. To help answer your questions with Pay As You Throw, we also have here with us this evening members of our Summit County government and representatives from local waste haulers. Aaron from the Summit County Resource Allocation Park, or SCRAP, is here, as well as Adrian, the Communications Director from the Summit County government. We also have representatives from Waste Management, Timberline, and Garbage Gurus. We will have about 25 minutes of presentation, followed by a question and answer period. As you listen, use the Q&A feature to ask your questions, and we will answer as many as we can before we end at 6:30. If your question does not get answered tonight, we will provide contact information, so you can reach out to get your specific questions answered. With that, I'll pass it over to Jen.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Heather. Again, I'm Jen Schenk with HC3, and thanks for coming tonight. We are going to jump into just a little bit of background on why we are talking about Pay As You Throw this evening. So I suspect many of you living in Summit County, especially if you've lived here a long time, have already started to see some climate impacts in Summit County. We're seeing shorter winters, more wildfires, and a lot less water in our streams over time. We have a community-wide goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050. So if we don't do anything and we continue on our current trend, Summit County is going to be a lot more like Eagle, Colorado, which is at 6,600 feet by 2050. Something that I didn't even realize until we actually did a greenhouse gas emissions inventory is that landfill gas from our local landfill is actually almost 10% of our local greenhouse gas emissions. And the reason for that is because when organic materials like food waste or wood break down in our landfill, they create methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. So since we have this community-wide climate goal with all of our local governments and HC3, it's really, really important that we start to reduce waste among all the other things we're doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We also have a community-wide waste reduction goal to double our recycling rate to 40% by 2035. So currently we recycle and compost 21% in Summit County, and 32% is the national diversion average. So we are behind, which is hard to believe since everyone in Colorado is so passionate and we have such robust recycling and composting programs in Summit County. So a few of the things that we have done here in Summit is since Strong Future, which was a mill levy that was adopted by you all, by voters of Summit County back in 2018, since that mill levy was adopted, it has created recycling funding annually. And some of the programs that we have implemented, and when I say we, a lot of this is Summit County government. So some Summit County government and then some HC3. But Summit County government has built the Silverthorne drop site. They have added food scrap collection to our drop sites. We have added more glass recycling locations, mattress recycling. We have increased our marketing and outreach. Hopefully, some of you have seen that, and that's why you're here. And then we have done a number of infrastructure improvements up at the scrap so that we can better process compost food scraps and process construction waste and your recycling. I'm also going to take just a minute to try to slow myself down because I know that when there's interpretation, I want to give our Spanish interpreter a little bit of extra time to understand what I'm saying. So, in terms of the program, just want to make sure we're all on the same page about whether pay as you throw will apply to you on the call or universal recycling. So if you have a green looking bin, that means your waste management customer probably. But if you have a bin that looks like this one in the upper right, this is called a toter or a cart. And this means if you have this at your house, it means you have curbside trash and perhaps recycling collection right now. This means that pay as you throw will apply to you. And that's primarily what we are going to be talking about this evening is this curbside collection for this type of individual cart that you may have at your house. If, on the other hand, you live in an area where you have something similar to this blue container and you share trash or recycling, then universal recycling is going to apply to you. You most likely live in a condo, would be my guess, but there are some single family home neighborhoods that also have this type of trash collection. So we will touch on universal recycling and some of the resources, but that's a very individualized program that Summit County Government and HC3 would love to help you more, but we're not going to get into a lot of details tonight on universal recycling. So in terms of pay as you throw, Pay as you throw is not a new program. It's been around for many, many years. In fact, 7,500 communities across the US already have pay as you throw in effect. And so it's a proven program. We know it works. And in fact, some states even have pay as you throw across their entire state. It's a requirement. You can see the examples that we have up on the screen. I always want to call out Vail. They have a program that was implemented back in 2014. And within 18 months, because of pay as you throw, they were able to double their diversion rate, which means they recycle twice as much, would be a better way to say that. And then most recently, you can see at the top of this slide that we implemented pay as you throw in Breckenridge and Frisco back in 2023. So how is it working in Brecken Frisco? We have increased, so we track our data in Summit County. We were talking about our current diversion rate being 21% a couple slides ago. What that means is that 79% of the waste that we produce is going into the landfill. So in terms of single stream recycling, that is the recycling that is collected at the curb, whether or not you are a business or a homeowner, renter, whether or not regardless of what kind of trash collection you have. That's the type of recycling that is collected curbside. So our single stream recycling has increased 10% across all of Summit County since implementation in Brecken Frisco. And Brecken Frisco don't have that many residents. It's like a third of the residents in the entirety of Summit County. So we truly believe that pay as you throw has had a big difference. That's data from 2023 to 2024, when between the time that pay as you throw went into effect and after it had been in effect for 1 year. So what is the program and how does it work? That's what we're going to cover tonight. In terms of the basics, if you have a cart like this at your home for trash collection right now, you have probably gotten a notice from your waste provider. And what that notice is asking you to do is select a trash bin size. So this one on the right is a small trash bin, roughly 32 gallons, 32 to 35 gallons. The green one is the medium size, and the blue one is the large size. Most people in Summit County who are outside of Frisco and Breck, because again, that program went into effect 2 years ago. So those of you on the phone tonight, I assume, are outside of Frisco and Breck. Most folks in Summit County have this green size, or so the middle size, the medium size, or the large size right now. So what will happen is that recycling will now be included with your trash service, and there will be one price for recycling and trash service. So we call that kind of a bundled trash and recycling rate. And then I want to emphasize that you can absolutely continue to use your current waste service provider. As Heather said earlier, we do have most of the major waste service providers on the phone. I don't know why I keep saying phone, Zoom, video. We have Waste Management, WM, we have Timberline, and then Garbage Gurus. I'm not sure they are attending, but they are a growing waste service provider for residential collection in Summit County. So all of the waste providers will offer this program. I also want to talk for a minute. I'm actually going to go back because this slide's distracting. I do want to specifically address, we've gotten a lot of questions in our office about what happens if you are already recycling at your house. Sorry, like you're driving it to the recycling site, and the program will still apply to you. You will still have recycling at your house. You will be paying for trash and recycling all in one. And the reason for that is because I know as longtime locals, many of us think like everyone in this community recycles, but the fact is, it's not true. Before we started looking at pay as you throw, and before it went into effect in Frisco and Breckenridge back in 2023, when we looked at the number of recycling accounts with people who have these individual toters, then only 30% of the trash accounts actually had recycling. So even though we may think everyone we know is recycling, whether they have curbside collection or driving it to the drop sites, it's simply not true. Those other 2/3 of the people who don't have curbside recycling are not driving it to the recycling centers. And so we really need to give people in this community access to recycling at their homes. We need to make recycling as convenient as trash. To get rid of our waste, it needs to be super, super simple. And so this program gives everyone, whether it's a resident or a visitor, access to recycling in Summit County. So a little bit more on the details of like how it works. We just talked about there are 3 different sizes that you'll be able to choose from on your trash can. So we got the small, the medium, and the large, and they all come with the same size recycling. Local governments or no governments can tell a private company or a waste provider how much they can charge for a service. But what a local government, and in this case, Summit County government or Frisco and Breckenridge have already done this, what they can do is they can create a base service level. And so in the pay-as-you-throw ordinance, Summit County government has created a base product that the waste providers in Summit County must offer. And it's this small bundle right here is the base rate. So it's a small trash can and a recycling bin. And essentially what the government has done is create a price ratio and said, in order for someone to move up to the medium size trash bin with recycling, they're going to pay 80% more. And then if a customer wants to move up to the large trash size, then that'll be another 80% more. So by the time you get to the large trash and recycling, you would be paying, if that's something you need to do and you're not able to downsize or it's a short-term rental, that will be 160% of the base rate, which is the small. And the reason for that 80% is it's been very well studied across the country that we have to have at least an 80% differential between the different bin sizes to truly incentivize change. So like if this large trash was only a few dollars more than the small trash, then obviously there would be no incentive for a resident to want to move down to the small trash. It wouldn't be worth the effort. So it's really much like a utility model that we're all used to with electricity or water. So if at my house I'm using less electricity or water than my neighbor, I would expect to pay less on my power bill or my water bill. And the way things have been going in Summit County is that essentially low trash producers are basically subsidizing the people who are using, the really large bins and producing a ton of trash. So this program really lets residents take control of their trash bills by getting involved in that decision and figuring out what works for each resident and waste provider customer. So for residents who don't currently have recycling, they will reduce the amount of trash that they produce simply by having access at their house and having the bin there. It's proven, it's been working across the country for many, many years. And then for residents who already have recycling, we'll talk a little bit more about opportunities to increase recycling on just a couple more slides. So in terms of one other thing I wanted to quickly add that's somewhat fascinating about these programs across the country is that what we have actually found in studying these programs is that under pay as you throw programs, residents and businesses actually produce less waste. On average, it's 16%. And we think that's because it affects people's buying decisions. So when someone goes to the store, they're thinking about what's going into their trash can if they've downsized to a 64 or 32 and they used to have a big trash can. So they may choose to not buy something, or they may choose to buy something that's in a smaller package or something that is in a package that is recyclable. So pretty cool stuff. Wildlife resistant bins. This is very important. Wildlife resistant bins are not required in Summit County, but certainly are encouraged. I know we've gotten a number of questions from people who are interested in downsizing, but they want to make sure they can get a 32-gallon trash can. That is wildlife resistant? And the answer is yes. The ordinance actually requires the waste providers to offer all 3 size trash bins with a wildlife resistant option. So those questions should be directed to the waste providers, but again, we do have them on our Zoom tonight if anyone has specific questions for them. Summit County government also currently has grant funding available through a Bear Safe Summit program and can offer a discount on buying a new bear-proof bin. So in terms of the timeline, I'm guessing a lot of you all as WM and Timberline customers have already been contacted about getting back to the waste provider on your bin selection, which is where we are right now in this spring summer timeline that you can see. The deadline for the waste providers to roll this out, which means the deadline that at your house you will have selected the size bin and have recycling at your home, is going to be August 31st. However, some of the waste providers are rolling this out a little bit earlier. So just know that's like the drop deadline when everyone will have to have that in place in unincorporated Summit County. And then in terms of universal recycling, and again, this is going to apply to those people who are using shared enclosures. So it's homeowners associations and businesses most typically. There's a little bit longer on-ramp for those programs because it's more costly and more planning in some cases because you're serving so many different residents or multiple businesses together. So those milestones are a bit farther out. You can see that 50% of businesses and HOAs will be in compliance in October of 26, and then 100% by October of 2027, because we want to make sure those larger entities have time to get this done. I'm not going to dig in too deeply to single stream recycling. I believe my colleague Christy is going to post a link to our website about what's included in single stream recycling. But essentially, if you already recycle at your home, nothing is changing. This is what you can recycle on your screen. Know that you still cannot recycle glass in single stream. So you will need to continue to bring that to one of our 3 local drop sites in Silverthorne, Breck, or Frisco. We also have, I mentioned this briefly earlier, but we do have food scrap drop off. We have a free program that's run through HT3, and we actually provide buckets that make the whole thing a lot less stinky. But I can speak from personal experience that we have reduced our trash substantially just by composting food waste. So that's a free program that really will help people who are looking to downsize their trash bin. It'll make it a lot easier. Also, we can recycle cartons at our local drop sites as well. So I have talked to a lot of Frisco and Breck. I happen to live in Frisco, but I have talked to a lot of Frisco and Breck residents who have and were a little bit leery, like they liked going to the recycling sites and they weren't super keen on, having recycling at their home. They didn't think they needed it. But I can tell you from experience, like once you have it at your house, it's very, very convenient. So again, recycling guidelines are not changing, and it will be this single stream collection regardless of who your waste provider is. Oh, look, I just talked about those exact things. So these are the free ways that we have in Summit County for people to downsize their trash. In terms of resources, I want to make sure I didn't skip a slide. Okay. We will have, so HC3 and Summit County government are available to answer any individualized questions you may have, whether you're a resident or a homeowners association president or a property manager. Like, we are here to help. And so our staff, and in some cases, if it's complicated, we'll even have a waste provider come out with us to a site, especially like a large homeowners association, to try to figure out like how you can get recycling added, how we can make your life easier and get this done so that you can come into compliance in plenty of, with plenty of advance notice and not have to do it quickly as those 2026 and 27 deadlines approach if you have a shared enclosure. But please call us. We also do have a little bit of grant funding available for businesses and multifamily homeowners association grants. In terms of universal recycling, again, we're not going to get down into a lot of details on this one, but if you live in a place or own a business, run a business, where you're using a shared enclosure like the one here, or a shared dumpster, essentially recycling service is going to be required in that 26, 27 timeline. Again, the intent behind this ordinance is to give everyone recycling in Summit County, and that's why it's called universal recycling by name in the ordinance. So glass recycling will also be required for businesses that have a liquor license, and there will be some specific requirements relating to volumes. So this is the extent of the detail I'm going to go into, but the requirement is that for a business or anyone using a shared dumpster like the one here, there will need to be 50% volume of recycling relative to the amount of trash. So in other words, if there's a condo complex that has a 6-yard trash and that's picked up once a week, they would need a 6-yard of recycling, and that could be in toters or, I mean, any different format, but it could be a 6-yard recycling dumpster, and that would have to be picked up every other week. So that's how you would get to half of the recycling. The intent here is really just to make sure that somebody doesn't have a bunch of 8-yard dumpsters for trash and then only 1 or 2 small toters for recycling that then fill up, in a day and no one else can recycle on property. And that brings us right into the Q&A. So I'm going to hand it back off to my colleague Heather, and we're super happy to answer any and all questions you all have.
Thanks, Jen, for all of that great information. We've received some really great questions in the chat, but before we get to those, I wanted to start with some of the questions that you all submitted when you registered. So this first question is, and Jen, I think you touched on this in your presentation, but the question is around how waste management specifically is rolling out pay-as-you-throw for the entire county for their customers, regardless of where they live in Summit. And I believe we have Brad with Waste Management on. Brad, are you able to jump in?
Hey, Heather, this is Curtis with WM. I can take that.
Awesome. Thanks, Curtis.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining tonight, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to address some of these questions. So yeah, as far as rollout of pay-as-you-throw, as the presentation touched on, pay-as-you-throw was rolled out in Breckenridge and Frisco about a year and a half ago. And then, of course, the county ordinance that passed last year with an effective date of this year required it for all unincorporated residents. And at that point, most of our customers within Summit County were already subject to the ordinance, either via as an unincorporated resident or as a resident of Breckenridge or Frisco. To kind of piggyback, and I won't repeat Jen's presentation, she was very thorough in terms of the benefits of pay as you throw, but WM as a sustainability company is a believer in pay as you throw, and we've seen the reduction in waste and the increase in diversion that rolling out successful pay as you throw programs have. And so, in order to create uniformity for our customers across Summit County, and not to create any disparities in terms of one resident has access to a program that is beneficial and another doesn't. We decided to introduce all of our customers in Summit County onto the Pay As You Throw program.
Okay. Thanks, Curtis. All right. This question came up in registration process, but I've also seen it tonight in the chat. It's essentially like if I had my own toter that I purchased from Lowe's, but now will be getting a new one through my hauler, what can I do with my unneeded toter? Jen, do you want to take this one?
Sure, absolutely. We are very fortunate that the scrap is willing. So yeah, if it's an unbranded, like something that you purchased yourself and you no longer need it, then Summit County, up at the scrap, which is again the landfill and recycling campus, they're willing to take those and recycle them. If it is a WM or Timberline or another waste provider's cart, then they will want that back to reuse it for someone else. Or if it's broken, I believe that each of WM and Timberline recycle their own bins.
Yeah, if I can just piggyback on that, what Jen said is accurate. So if it's a WM cart, we'll pick it up. In most cases, we're able to reuse that somewhere else. But all of our carts, our poly carts, are made with recyclable material. And so carts that cannot be reused, we work with cart manufacturers to have those broken down and turned into new carts. And so they're recycled and not landfilled.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah, we definitely want to keep those out of the landfill. Um, Jen, you talked about this one in the presentation, but I still wanted to flag it. So this question was, when I signed up for my new bin, I didn't see a 32-gallon bear resistant option. Are those actually available? So Curtis or someone from Timberline want to chime in here?
Yeah, same. So yes, the ordinance requires a 32-gallon bear resistant container. And so I think we're working on getting our response section updated because we do have 32-gallon bear resistant containers available. And so if that hasn't been updated already, we're working on that. So that way when our customers in Summit scan that QR code and go to the website to select their bin size, a 32-gallon bear resistant container will be available as an option.
Is there anybody from Timberline or one of the other haulers that wants to chime in? Not, we'll move on. We can come back to it too if you're having a moment trying to get on camera and off mute. Um, okay. So, Jen, I know you said like Christy put a link in the chat to more information about our single stream recycling, but there's been a lot of questions tonight around, and maybe it's a little bit of confusion around single stream versus drop sites, because we've seen comments that fives aren't accepted. So can you talk a little bit more about what can be recycled and also address the infamous clamshells?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I can talk a bit more about plastics. So in single stream recycling, again, that's what everyone will have at their homes and businesses. So I like to talk, we've really moved away from talking about numbers to some degree. We're trying to keep it, we try to talk more about shapes in terms of plastic. So in the single stream, you can put bottles, tubs, which is like a yogurt tub, um, and jugs, like a milk jug. Those are the main shapes of plastics that we want to see. We really need to avoid, I think they number 7 is kind of the catch-all. But you really want to avoid putting like a rigid plastic, like something that doesn't bend in the single stream that is not recyclable. So like a 5-gallon bucket, something like that, a Tupperware container. Those are simply not recyclable in single stream recycling, and they're not recyclable really anywhere that I know of. There's no demand for those. In terms of clamshells, we talk about clamshells. Most of you may know them more as like a berry container. Those are not recyclable in single stream, even though they have a number 1 and a number 1 bottle. And if you want to talk about that, please feel free to give me a call or give Christy a call, and we can get more into the specifics of how basically those materials are made. But yes, berry containers sadly are still not recyclable. There is no demand for that to be recycled. Like there's no one that wants to take it and recycle it.
We've got a lot of great questions. I will see if we can get to all of them this evening. I think Aaron or Jen, I'll let you guys fight over this question. I'm going to kind of combine a couple. I think it's great that we've seen a 10% increase in recycling with the rollout in Frisco and Breck. Um, the question here is just around like the impact on diversion from the landfill and kind of building on that. They recognize that the county has stated that the primary driver for pay as you throw was the longevity of the landfill. So why do we not transport our non-recyclables to a regional landfill like other parts of the state or country do? I know Aaron's here.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Aaron take that one.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
Sorry about that. For some reason, I'm not able to get my camera on, but yeah. So there's a lot of material at scrap that are currently being diverted. One, when we talk about traditional recycling, the materials that we're recycling now, and what we're talking about in this conversation related to single stream and what's being diverted in the single stream and the recycling public drop-off sites. We also have several programs in the C&D arena that is also getting diverted from scrap. The county has invested as a whole in our landfill from the beginning, the start of our landfill to closure. So it's very vital for Summit County for us to be able to maintain and have a sustainable model where the material in Summit County stays in Summit County and we're able to manage Summit County's waste stream. So we still look at materials that are being recycled and end markets. And at this juncture, all the materials that are being recycled as far as outside of traditional recycling, compost, C&D materials, those materials do stay here in Summit County. We're looking at different markets, and there might be an opportunity where those materials go outside of Summit County. And we do currently some of the recycling that comes through our program. The majority of the single stream material does go to the Front Range Waste Management, Franklin Street, MRF, and is further processed and recycled. The materials that we accept at our recycle centers, the majority of those materials get processed at our facility because they are currently separated by the public, and all those materials go to the mills directly. Does that answer the question?
I hope so. If not, if you put that in the chat, you feel free to add a follow-up. Or again, I think there's a slide we'll share with some contact information. So if we don't get to your question tonight, or you think of a question after this evening's event, that you can reach it. Well, Aaron, while we've got you, we do have a question around construction and demolition, or construction and deconstruction recycling. Do you want to speak on that really quick?
Yes, Heather. And I was looking at the questions here and I didn't see that question. Could you repeat the question?
That one came through over the phone. It
Oh,
was, so I don't have like the specifics, and I can move it to the bottom of the list if you want a minute, because I know it's not exactly pay as you throw related.
I think
um,
someone, can you hear me? Sorry to jump in. I think someone just didn't understand when he said C&D materials, they didn't know what that meant.
Okay.
okay. So I apologize for that. So C&D materials, construction, demolition materials. So currently scrap has construction demolition materials. We have a 5-year plan and we're really focused on that diversion. So some of those materials may be from a job site that comes in where they have material that's coming in loose in a roll-off container hauled by a hauler or a contractor. And we have diversion programs such as concrete, scrap metal, wood pallets, raw dimensional lumber, slash, beetle kill, lodgepole pine, materials like that go into some of those materials go into our compost program. And we're looking at expanding those programs. We're taking small steps towards that, focusing on some of the low hanging fruit, and hopefully that list expands in the future.
Thank you. All right. So this one, I think the real question here is around yard waste. This person said that, they have a larger trash bin, and, most of the time they don't fill it up, but they do like this time of year with yard waste. So I think really like talking about what's best to do with yard waste to keep those organics out of the landfill. So I think, Aaron, yeah, back to you.
I'd be happy to take that one. So that is something that we really encourage, especially diverting it from the landfill and accepting that in our compost program. We do have some stipulations. If it is grass and leaves, we are happy to take it. This time of year, I know everybody's doing aeration and raking and doing everything they can to get their yards looking good. The thing that we're really trying to avoid is dirt and rock, because we'd like to take that carbon nitrogen source and mix it directly into our compost windrows to be able to get a finished product. And we really do not need any contamination in that program. And we're really, we do waste screening when it comes to our site. So if the material remains clean and it is grass and leaves, we can take that material through our compost program.
That's great. Thanks, Aaron.
Yep.
And Christy or Madeline, will one of you maybe put a link to the Scraps website too, so folks can learn more about all of the wonderful things that Aaron's team does up there at what we lazily often call the landfill, because it's so much more going on up there. Okay, I've got one for Curtis. Our HOA users with waste management, when will pay as you throw, or will pay as you throw be implemented for towns like Dillon and Silverthorne?
Yeah, so good question. The ordinance allowed a 12-month additional implementation deadline for group accounts that are under contract. And so Our expectation is to comply with that for group accounts after we've completed other residents in Summit County. And so at some point, probably later this year or early next year, you'll hear from your group account manager at WM to kind of coordinate that and talk about what that's going to look like in terms of amending the contract with the group.
Thanks, Curtis. Appreciate you being here tonight. Um, so Aaron, we did get a follow-up with the question around like diversion from the landfill and kind of like the why that's so important. And I do think that this is really important for us to make sure that our community knows why we want to divert as much as we can from our landfill. So it's essentially, um, oh, I lost the question because everything's bopping around. But can you just like talk about why it's so important for, not just this like thing around the circular economy, why it's so important for us to not be sending our things down to Denver or elsewhere?
Sure. Thank you. So we have we have one landfill in Summit County. So it's really important that we do everything we can to divert as much as we can and extend that life of that landfill as long as possible. We know that we will most likely never be able to locate or relocate another landfill, and we say, why would we? Because we live in an amazing environment here in the county, and we want to do everything we can to preserve that. So we have a landfill that's been active since the late 60s. And horizontally throughout the footprint of that landfill, we have a lot of fill areas that have trash in them. And what we have as far as remaining airspace is expanding vertically throughout that footprint. Our estimated closure date is 2078. Some would say that's a long ways out. Why do we continue to focus on these diversion programs the way that we do? Everything that we can do counts. It's very vital. It's very important. So our goal and as far as managing that airspace and looking at the entire picture long term, it's really critical to us that we extend that time frame out even further. Several years ago, we did a site life calculation. I want to say it was around 2016, and our estimated closure date was 2054. And through good management, continued efforts in diversion, there were some design errors we had to go back through and revisit a couple things. But for a landfill to gain more airspace, that's a major win and accomplishment. And we're really hanging on to that, where we encounter partnering landfills throughout Colorado, even across the country, where they lose that airspace and come to find out if they're not managing it well, next thing you know, they got 10 years left or 5 years, and everybody's scrambling to improve on diversion and doing everything they can. So we feel very fortunate in the county. It's really important for us to extend that life out. And it's kind of it's a model that we talk about. We get this question asked a lot. Well, why don't we just ship the refuse or other materials down to the Front Range? And when we look at this as a whole, we're looking at the problems that we have here in Summit County. We don't want to make our solid waste another community's problem. We want to keep it here where we can manage everything as a whole. And for us to close our landfill properly and to be able to manage our landfill the right way, we still have to manage that with the entirety of all the solid waste in Summit County. So it really makes sense for us to be able to look at everything as a whole, see how everything is being diverted in the county, work with our partners, the haulers, the residents, the community, everybody that's involved in this process, and to be able to make really good decisions and have the best interest for the community and be able to extend this life out as far as we can.
Thanks, Aaron. And yeah, just thinking about how Jen started her presentation around greenhouse emissions. I mean, just the like trucking alone, um, like avoiding that also helps reduce those emissions.
And
Um, Go ahead.
no, and I would echo that too, Heather. I, I look at other communities where there are the challenges where they run out of airspace or they do close their landfill, and that cost to transfer that material to a front range landfill or western slope landfill or somewhere of a much greater distance is very, very costly. So we look at the carbon footprint as a whole, we look at that increased cost to the community, and it's really important for us to, again, allow us to manage the entire waste stream here in the county and do the best we can. And I feel like we got great leadership and a good team and everybody's efforts, and we're on track and doing a good job in Summit County.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we've had a couple of questions around food scraps. I know Jen talked about this, um, but I think some of our haulers will do food scrap pickup, but you can go to High Country Conservation's website, and I'm sure one of my trusted teammates will put a link in here and you can sign up to be a part of our food scrap program. And we have free bins that you can pick up so you can start food scrapping at your house to keep those organic materials out of the landfill to not only extend the life of the landfill, but also reduce the methane emissions that organics can cause when they get trapped in there. I'm seeing some questions too about some other types of recyclables and yard waste. Uh, I do want to also plug and get the link for this in the chat as well. On the HC3 website, we have a tool that's kind of acts like Google a little bit for like how can I recycle this particular item? Like someone asked about shredded paper. So it's a great place to start there if you're not sure if you can recycle a certain item. And just so you know, like if we don't have that built in there, we are watching to see like what people are asking and trying to make sure that we keep that as up to date as possible. So it's learning as it goes around what you are curious about, the recycling robot tool. Thank you, team. Okay, I hope that I got to all of the questions that we promised. We've been trying to answer some of the questions directly in the chat. Um, Jen, is there any final thoughts that you have? And maybe we can give everyone a few more minutes back in their evening.
No, just really appreciate everyone's time this evening, and we're happy to field any calls. I've been typing away at answering some of the questions that were very specific and jumped in to do that. But yeah, thanks again. And again, please call us or email us. You can see our email on the screen. And we're happy to talk more about this and are really looking forward to the difference this makes in Summit County. I also just want to thank, I know all of the haulers or waste providers are not here this evening, but huge shout out to the waste providers. So to WM, Timberline, Garbage Gurus, Summit Roll-Offs are the primary ones. Even though this program is going to be amazing and it's working really well in Frisco and Breck, it is a very big change. So each of you are on the receiving end as a customer of their communication. They're trying to work with us and each of you. But it's a heavy lift to make this transition, even in a community the size of Summit County, which is small relative to some of these national companies. But thank you for working with us and helping us help the residents figure this out. And that's all I had.
Well said, Jen. All right, thank you all. Reach out if you have questions, and this ends our presentation.